Hello and welcome to the LRM podcast in association with Britpart. I'm Martin Dominy.
And I'm Steve Miller.
And you join us for an hour of chat about Land Rovers and everything to do with owning them. And in fact, in this episode, it's everything to do with how you became to own them as well. Straight off the bat, a listener's question. This is from Daniel, an email saying, I'm not sure if this is the correct email address to ask buyer's advice. Well, it is. I've been on the hunt for my first Defender and I'm struggling to figure out if I'm better off with a 300 TDI or a TD5. Sort of an age-old question, really, isn't it? Especially if you go into the depths of the internet.
It certainly opens a can of worms when you ask that question on social.
Everyone's got an opinion, haven't they?
Yeah, and they're all right.
He goes on, I've driven a mate's TD5, which I really liked, but they seem to go for more money than the 300 TDI. It won't be used as my daily, more of a weekend/outdoors dog vehicle, maybe occasional commuting, budget of around £13,000. So, and I love the podcast and the magazine, and I'd really appreciate some advice, which is what we're going to try and give you, Daniel. So, my advice would be, if you've driven a TD5, drive a TDI as well.
I agree with that because they're completely different.
They are, in my mind, they sort of represent the fully mechanical and then the electronically controlled engines in Defenders, and you certainly feel that when you're driving it. I don't think you can beat the feel of a throttle cable.
The only thing I don't like about my TD5, and I am fortunate to have a 300 TDI in the garage, although it's not on the road at the minute, as it's not, but I agree with the throttle cable thing. The electronic aspect of the TD5, I love the engine and I love the sound of the engine and I love the character of it, but the actual throttle is very electronic. The feeling of it.
They can be a bit flat and a bit sort of like the real low down grunt of a TD5 sometimes isn't there, and I don't think that's necessarily to do with the engine itself. It's to do with how the pedal makes it feel. Whereas a TDI, if you put your foot down 25%, that throttle's opening 25% straight away. There's no quibble.
Definitely. And I think, away from the throttle cable thing, TD5s are actually a more modern Land Rover, so they tend to be slightly higher priced because they're a bit later in the lineup, and you might be slightly better condition.
Yeah, I mean,
might not be.
It's difficult because obviously people who bought Defenders back when they were new were probably using them for similar things, regardless of whether they bought a 300 or a TD5. So you'll find really scruffy old pickup variants of both versions, and you'll find really lovely, pristine station wagons of both variants, I'd have thought. But yes, I think you will end up paying a bit more for a TD5. Not a huge amount, but a bit.
I haven't seen many station wagon TD5s though around that budget.
We've had a couple on.
I would say there's some, but I would say that for me, if 13,000 was my upward budget, I think Daniel mentions that.
13,000 quid. Yeah,
I would rather buy a better condition TDI than a ropier TD5 for my money.
Oh yeah,
particularly that it's a dog car weekend. Simplicity, I would probably lean towards the 300 TDI.
I see what you're saying. There's more to it, obviously, than just the engine, because they did make more revisions through, the 300 TDI came out in
94 to 98,
that was
99.
98, 99, when TD5 took over and then went all the way through till 2006.
Yes.
So both had a reasonable run, so you're probably going to have quite a lot to choose from. He doesn't mention, I don't think, if he wants a 90 or a 110.
No, he doesn't, and that's the other thing. You're more than likely, although the 110 offers more, they are lower priced, aren't they?
Commercial ones are, certainly.
Oh, commercial.
Station wagons, probably about the same, maybe slightly more for a station wagon. Yeah. There's also comes down to minute things like the colours. Like, obviously, they did different colour schemes in TDI era to TD5 era. Maybe you really like, I don't know, Alveston Red, which didn't come on a. They might have done it in the last year of TDI production. I think they called it Rioja Red was last year of TDI. Alveston was a TD5 only colour, so if you really want like one of them or Cairns Blue or something like that, you're going to have to go TD5. Whereas if you're a bit more flexible or you really like the TDI colours, you've got to go for a TDI. It all depends, really.
I have never ever purchased a Land Rover based on its colour.
No, I haven't either. But people do, though.
Because I just like them. I kind of like them all. As long as they're original colours, particularly. I know we spoke about colours last week. Original, I tend to be more in tune with original colours.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think colours
period correct.
Probably quite far down on the list of things to look for when buying a Defender, actually. You need to buy on a lot more, in my mind, important factors than the colour. Like, is the chassis and bulkhead in good condition? Or is it falling to bits? What's the overall condition like? Has it got good history? Things like that.
Yes, so I think you would open up. I mean, the other thing, with that budget, you might find yourself a nice 300 TDI that's been re-chassied already.
Yeah.
A galvanised chassis, and that's probably quite an important.
Absolutely.
But I'm not saying go out and look. Again, original chassis that's never been welded and doesn't need welding. They're few and far between.
Certainly.
A lot of them have had replacement rear cross members and things, and you want to make sure that they've been done correctly.
I was going to say, it's all about the quality of those repairs, isn't it? Because you go and look at something that's had welding and it's covered in half an inch of thick black underseal, you start to wonder, don't you?
Yeah, there's welding and there's welding.
Yeah, so if you can get one, if you're not that fussed about it being on its original chassis, and I don't think that many people are in the grand scheme of things, getting one with a galvanised chassis, it really is a bonus. So keep an eye out for them.
It's a job you don't have to do in a few years.
Yeah. I'd also say, actually, on Land Rover Monthly Classifieds, if you scroll back a few pages, there's all sorts of gems that are sort of aren't right on the first couple of search results. So, like the first 2 pages, if you keep going, there's still some really nice vehicles for sale back there.
Yeah, still active listings, aren't they?
Absolutely. So it's well worth having a look on there. And you know you're buying from someone who's actually cared about their Land Rover. They're an enthusiast. They're selling hopefully to an enthusiast. So there's that. I mean, a lot of other places where you can advertise Land Rovers, you haven't got that guarantee, whereas you can tell by the way someone's written an advert that they really love the vehicle they're selling.
Yeah, like we spoke about this before in a previous podcast about AI written adverts.
Oh, total turn off.
I don't think there's a single AI written advert on our website at the moment.
No, because we don't offer that service, because you should know about the car you're selling and you should put the effort and time.
Yeah, but somebody may have copied and pasted their own AI description and popped it in, but because we monitor those classifieds and we basically approve them every time somebody wants to list something,
yes,
we have a quick read through, don't we, to make sure that it's as genuine as it looks.
Yes, that's very true. Yeah, I didn't even think that they could copy and paste it from elsewhere, but that is a possibility. Yeah, but as far as I can tell, so far there have been none, and long may that continue, because I absolutely hate AI written adverts. They get my back right up. So I'm aware we haven't really answered his question, apart from you're probably better off buying a really nice TDI and hopefully one with a galvanised chassis.
Yes, buy on condition.
Drive one first.
Oh yeah, but if you, I don't think you dislike a TDI over a TD5 because you just get used to them.
Yeah.
But just buy on condition, and from a trusted person, somebody you look in the eye and think they are a genuine seller.
You can pick up a lot. I really shy away from negotiating over messenger or text or even on the phone, because I want to go and meet the person I'm potentially buying a car from, because you get so much of a better sort of idea of who they are, what they've done, how much they've actually cared for the thing, if they've quickly bought it and they're trying to get rid of it again. You learn a lot more. You
can suss people out. I mean, equally, as a seller, if they like you, they're more inclined to negotiate better with you as well, I've noticed.
So, to summarise, probably a 300 on that budget, but the very, very nice 300. But drive one first, make sure you don't hate it.
The other thing I'm going to add, actually, is don't rush in, because I've often bought the very first thing I've seen.
Yeah, I've done that.
and it's taken me about 20 Land Rovers to not do that. And each time I think, I'll never make that mistake again. And then all of a sudden you find yourself with a few quid in your pocket.
Oh, it's so
you go
easy
Land
to do.
Rover shopping and you end up buying the car that you regret.
Yes.
And then you have to spend more than the value of the vehicle putting it right.
Getting it right. I had that. This actually got me thinking. That email from Daniel there made me think about the first ever Land Rover I got, and the adventures I had learning to drive and passing my test and things like that. And it's like, seems like forever ago now, because it was. But I did that exact same thing. I actually saw mine in the classifieds in the local newspaper. Do you remember when people used to buy out newspapers?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
It was on a farm only a few miles away from where I sort of lived most of my life as a kid. And my dad took me over there on a Saturday, and the guy, he was an old farmer, he had this old 90, I think he's replaced it with something else, and looked around it and went for a drive up on his private road and things like that, and I was head over heels in love with it. It was a 1990 200 TDI truck cab, and I badgered my dad. I was like, I've got to have it. And the guy, I remember, he also had a Volkswagen Polo for sale that his son had used, and then moved away, and my dad kept trying to steer me towards this Polo as my first car, and I was having none of it. But that was a case of, that was the first one we looked at. It was
love is blind, as they say. You just don't look at the things that...
I couldn't have run into that purchase faster if I tried.
Yeah, no.
I was 16 when I got it, and it was like just everything I wanted in one vehicle. But actually, when MOT time rolled around, it became apparent that, you know, it hadn't been well looked after. That, you know,
that VW Polo seemed quite appealing at
my
MOT
dad
time.
was sort of like, well, I did tell you the Polo would have been about...
I do hate the "I told you so" thing.
Yeah, there was there was an element of that, but it was I don't regret it at all. It was great fun in the time that I had it. And I remember actually when I was still learning to drive, because my driving instructor used to come round, pick me up, and then we go off have the driving lesson, and then he dropped me back. He had a Peugeot 206. That was like the main car that I learned to drive in.
I was a Peugeot 106.
Really?
Yeah, I passed my test with a Peugeot 106.
I didn't realise they made them that long ago.
Yeah, naturally aspirated 1.4 diesel. Made a 2 1/4 Series 3 seem fast, I'm telling you. It was the most flattest car I've ever driven.
Unstallable though in a...
No, I had a good go.
Yeah.
Kangarooing. Have you ever kangarooed a 106 off a roundabout?
I can't say I have.
Some of my early driving lessons.
I do remember the 206, the pedals were so close together compared to a Land Rover. It was like you were tripping over your own feet.
Well, when I first had a driving lesson in Peugeot 106, I mean, I've got size 11 feet, and I had size 11 feet when I was 17. And I'd only driven, at that time, tractors.
Yeah.
And I'm talking old school tractors like Fordson Majors, David Brown's Selectomatics. I'd driven an old John Deere. I'd driven an old Land Rover, and then I'm getting this Peugeot 106, and it felt like getting into your nana's car. You know?
Yeah.
So tiny pedals, tiny steering wheel,
Tiny engine,
and just felt like it was just too big for the car.
Yeah. I just couldn't. I kept going to dip the clutch and clipping the brake pedal with my foot and stuff like that.
Because you're wearing boots.
I had boots or big... You remember like old skate shoes, like DC skate shoes, like the real puffy skate shoes. I used to wear them to
because I was cool.
Yeah.
I was at least cool 17-year-old.
Weren't invented when you were learning to drive. Anyway.
Surprised I didn't pass the test in Austin, Cambridge on that old
horse and cart. Anyway.
I'm still not that
old. But yeah, once my driving instructor came to pick me up from my house, and he noticed the Land Rover on the driveway, and he said, "Oh, is that your first car?" And I was like, yeah. I couldn't wait to show him around it. Lovely old boy. He lived in the same village I did, and we knew him quite well. And he said, "Well, why don't we have, if it's insured, why don't you have your driving lesson this week in the Land Rover?" And I thought this was the best idea ever. I couldn't wait to drive this thing on the road.
I don't even think driving instructors would do that now, would they?
I don't know. I think you can take lessons in your own car.
Probably, but yeah.
By this point, obviously...
If you can pass your test in an old Land Rover, though, I think you can drive anything.
Well, certainly the gearbox took a bit of fiddling. It was a 200 TDI, so notchy old LT77 sort of, you had to
reverse is very close to first, isn't it?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, it can catch you out as a new driver.
But I thought, I can't wait, let's do it. And it started raining fairly early on into the 2-hour lesson, I think it was. And so I was thinking, this isn't a problem. I'll just put the demister on. I pulled the thing down, the fan roared into life, and the screen just didn't clear. It was just fogging up, and I was wiping it with a thing. Obviously, not the best thing to do when you're trying to learn to drive. And I could see him get more and more agitated, and we got from where I lived into the next village, and the side windows would steam up by this point, and it was like I was winding the window down and still wiping the windscreen and fiddling with the heater controls to try and get the windscreen to demist, and he was like, nope, that's it, turn around, we're going back to yours. We're going to go back, get the trusty Peugeot.
So I think your driving instructor must have been quite brave, because even back in my day, the car that had dual controls, and he wouldn't have had dual controls, would he?
Didn't.
So it's not like he could realistically pull the handbrake up in the event of something
but then again
untoward happening. You must have been pretty competent.
I'd done
at that point.
a few lessons by that point, but as many people who are into Land Rovers, you learn to actually operate a vehicle long before you actually get to the age where you can drive on the road. So
yeah,
I had more experience in a Land Rover than anything else, especially a little Peugeot. My dad's always worked on farms, and I'd go with him to count the cattle at the weekends and feed and things like that. So I'd drive their Defender 110 off-road, and I had a reasonable idea of
so clutch control, the normal basics of a
so actually moving the thing around,
stopping, steering, and
wasn't an issue. It was everything else happening around you, like as
lane control and approaching roundabouts,
preempting people pulling out in front of you, and cyclists and pedestrians and lights and signs and all that stuff. So, but obviously that was too much for me to do, as well as frantically wipe the inside of the Defender's windscreen because it wouldn't demist. So that was short-lived, but I passed my test first time, which I'm very proud of. And I remember the excitement on the ride home. I made him drive so I could text my mates and tell them that I'd passed my test.
You didn't have text when I passed my test?
Well, you might have sent like a telegram or something.
There was no one to text.
Why? Because you didn't have any friends?
Well, yeah, probably.
Because texting wasn't a thing.
When I passed my test, I didn't even own a mobile phone.
Right.
This was in 1995.
Okay.
So I had a phone from about 96.
Did you just go to the top of a hill and light a fire and do smoke signals or something?
Yeah, I passed my test. Well, I had one, mate, so...
fair enough. Anyway, so on the way back, and I remember I ran into the house and I told my dad, and he was really happy. And I rang up my insurance company and I told them that I was no longer a learner, and they obviously charged more money because I was safe to go out and terrorise the roads on my own. And I tore the L plates off my Land Rover. And just the best feeling ever. Freedom. And I went everywhere in that little 90. Loads of camping trips. Go down the river with a barbecue and have some barbecue at the side of the river and go canoeing and all sorts of stuff. It was wicked.
I couldn't afford to go anywhere in my first Land Rover.
Why?
Because it did 11 miles to the gallon.
Yeah, fair enough.
It was a 2A lightweight.
Right.
But I remember my uncle bought the Land Rover first, but he knew I wanted one, but he wanted one to go on the local shoot.
Right.
And in the woods and things. And the advert, again, another advert in the newspaper.
In the paper, yeah. A rarity.
I think the advert read something like, old Land Rover, 1980, £1,250. And it was only up the road. So anyway, went to a farm, and it turned out to be a 2A lightweight. Can you imagine a 2A lightweight now for £1,250?
Snap it up, wouldn't you?
Truck cab, pickup. I can't find the old photos that I had of it, and I wish I could, because it's a brilliant old thing.
Right.
And obviously 1972, but registered in 1980 when it obviously came out of the army. He bought it. I was in love with it, and he decided he didn't really need a Land Rover, so I begged him to sell it to me.
Right.
Of which he did. And my first car was a Vauxhall Savette.
Right.
Which, to be fair,
it's a pretty cool first car still.
Not in that day.
Oh, really? Because
A 1982 Chevette was still, you'd see other Vauxhall Chevettes on the road, and they were driven by old people.
Okay. Because now Chevettes are quite cool.
Yeah, I'd definitely have another one. If I could find my first car, I would.
Oh, that'd be awesome. There's probably a washing machine now, though.
Yeah, it was bad enough then.
Was it?
I learned how to apply body filler before the age of 18.
A bucket and a trowel.
Yeah, just old Coke cans and things like that to repair the rear valance.
Yeah,
that
I've
rotted.
Done a few repairs.
Bit of filler and bit of black paint, and she was away.
Well, you got to keep them going, haven't you?
Yeah, but then anyway, begged my uncle to sell me the Land Rover. And my uncle had, he was the guy that actually got me into Land Rovers in the first place.
Right.
Because he had a logging business with my granddad at the time, and they use a Series 2A 109 ex-military Land Rover that no rear body.
Right.
So on the outriggers and the rear cross member were welded on uprights of scaffold tubes.
Okay.
So that would take the timber out of the wood.
I see. Yeah.
V-grip tyres, no cab. It's actually on my Instagram, so anyone wants to have a look at a picture from... I've added it on there from a couple of years back, but Steve_Miller_automotive. Check it out. There's a picture. He's called Alan, and his mate Craig built this thing. And it was like something like out of the A-Team.
Yeah,
do you remember? Like
it must have had
properly
quite a Mad Max look
Mad Max looking thing. And I used to ride around the woods as a kid, like 9 years old, standing... holding on to the top of the windscreen because there's no roof on it.
Yeah.
And he would just drive it around, and they would load all the wood onto it and then take it out onto the tracks. Brilliant thing. It was unstoppable.
The ideal vehicle.
Well, it was called the AlCraig because Alan and Craig built it. The AlCraig was always... I'll just go and get the AlCraig.
The AlCraig.
So my childhood was that vehicle and the obsession I had with it. So when my uncle had this Land Rover, of course... I begged him to buy it.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
And I rushed into it, bought the Land Rover, and he hadn't really been far in it. And the thing did 11 miles to the gallon. And it liked a drink of oil.
What was it, 2.25?
Yeah, 2.25 petrol. Really, really bad. And when you're not earning a lot of money, 11 to the gallon, even when fuel was cheap, it's all relative, isn't it?
Yes.
My wage at the time was £99 a week.
Okay. Yeah. Do you know what? Actually,
not much more than that now.
Yeah, right. I think mine was similar. Mine obviously didn't have the miles per gallon issue. Yours did because it was a TDI. They did about.
Mine was tired.
Yeah,
it was tired, a bit smoky.
The TDI, mine was healthy, and even though I was 17, so I drove it flat, absolutely, my foot welded to the floor. It still returned reasonable economy. The trouble was, I think the farmer who had it used it pretty much exclusively on his land and maybe nipped into the village to buy stuff. I was obviously driving it to and from Cambridge where I worked at the time and back every day and using it socially, and its shortcomings very, very quickly became apparent. So I was doing wheel bearings, the tyres all started coming apart because they were so old. The seats were absolutely hanging, as you'd imagine an old farm vehicle that's been used for years and years and years.
Jack Russell's eaten them or something.
Chunks of foam. Luckily, one of the shops in town, it was actually like a car modification shop. Do you remember them? Like the old car accessory shops.
Like Connoisseur.
It was Connoisseur.
Connoisseur.
Years
ago. I bought a pair of bucket seats from
Connoisseur. That's what I was getting to. I bought a pair of Cobra Clubmans.
Yeah, I had them.
Oh.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I went through my... I'm going to build a Lara Croft Tomb Raider replica.
Really?
For my next military 90. So basically, ruined it by going to the original Billing Land Rover show and buying the checker plate kit for the back. Oh, so the whole back was lined in silver checker plate and those two bucket seats in the front. You couldn't get to the battery. It was under the seat. Bolted in.
Yeah, so
horrendous.
I think I bought it might have been Scorpion Racing back then, the bolt-in mounting kit for the seats.
Scorpion Racing, that was right, yeah.
Which is like a H double H shape, so they bolted to the seat box and then you bolted the seat to the subframe, and it was like kept it nice and low. But like you say, whenever you need to get to the battery, you're doing 4 bolts to get it out. My dad hated them because you couldn't
They
get
were
in and out
nightmare
of
to
the
get
thing.
in and out of.
Obviously, when you're 17, you don't care about that. They look wicked, and I had like some old harnesses in it. And
Do they look wicked now, though?
to a 17-year-old, I bet they would still look cool.
Yeah, probably.
And I did. I got rid of the tyres and I got some Insa turbos, some Dakars, which is like the old BF Goodrich pattern.
Oh, yes.
Mud terrains.
Yeah.
They were really good. I really like them. On white 8 spokes, of course.
The wheel choice.
And polished.
Anyone that wants to talk or listen, if they haven't listened to podcast number 1.
The very first podcast,
Yeah.
we go into the...
Do you remember that? 2 months ago that was.
I know, amazing. We go into detail on all sorts of wheels, but the white 8 spoke was for me, mostly because it came on them already, so I just painted them, really. And I got some springs from Scorpion Racing. Scorpion Racing, the bright orange ones.
Oh, yeah. Everything was orange, wasn't it?
Yeah, everything was like in-your-face colours back then, wasn't it? So
They were the days where, back in the Land Rover magazines, back then, Scorpion Racing would have like page after page of adverts.
yeah,
All the finest goodies, weren't they? They were absolutely amazing.
yeah, absolutely. They had a kit for everything, didn't they? They had like the Extreme kit, the Evolution kit, all sorts of like different front and rear trailing and radius arms and spring packages and massive dampers and things like that.
Do you remember QT Services?
Yeah,
They used to do a kit called the Weekender.
the Weekender.
I love the look of that. That was brilliant.
Yeah, and then
All the
was that the
dislocation.
3-link front?
Well, they
Someone
used to
did
do
a
like a
3-link.
dislocation cones and things. They were like new to get.
Yeah, relocation. Yeah, so basically, if you're not familiar with the system, you basically fit a shock absorber or a damper that's too long for the spring. So when the suspension extends, the spring can then come away from the chassis or the axle,
And basically hang
and the
there.
axle just hangs, and then when it recompresses, it allows the suspension to sort of relocate itself, and you carry on. I always preferred the spring retained at the top and the cone on the axle. I always found that worked
Did
better.
I think they had a choice.
Yeah, you could get a couple of different styles of kit. I always found that worked better, but it was always a competition, really. Me and other friends at the time who had Land Rovers, and we'd go off roading. Any excuse, any opportunity, we'd be at a pay and play to see who had the most like flexible Land Rover. It was like
Spent like at the shows, like Twist Off was a massive,
the RTI ramp.
massive thing, wasn't it? Twist Off.
I've got a great picture actually on my Facebook memories, came up a couple of days ago, of my mate Sam and I in his 90 at, I can't remember what show it was, but he basically had a winch rope on his roll cage, and we went so far up the RTI ramp that we just flopped it on its side, and we're both sat in this 90, and the picture's taken through the windscreen, and we're absolutely just cracking up laughing as it's just chilling there in the middle of the arena just on its side, and we're hanging from our seatbelts. So much fun.
I have a claim to fame.
Go on.
So I'm the first person to take a Discovery 5 up what was the Flat Dog Twist Off ramp.
The Discovery 5?
Yeah.
Oh, right. How did it do?
Not very well at
Oh,
all. But it was interesting. So comparing at that show, it was up in the Driffield Land Rover
Yeah,
show.
Driffield,
I think
yeah.
Cy Sager was the compare.
Right.
And it did the same going forwards as it did backwards, which was quite unusual.
Yeah.
It's the same distance. I remember him saying it got as far going forwards as it did going in reverse.
Okay.
It didn't do very well compared to, can you imagine?
Well, they like we said before, they rely less on masses of suspension travel now and more on traction control. But that was always like a huge highlight, wasn't it, of the shows of old, the RTI ramp in the arena, and people, doing all they could to try and obviously traditionally a Defender or something like that, even with modified suspension, the rear of it is always a lot more flexible. They articulate a lot more than the front.
Yes.
So they get to a point and they're sort of teetering on the edge, and the back wheel's just doing like half a turn and grabbing and trying to grip, and it's sort of right on the sort of break over. Is it going to fall over, or are you calling that your score type thing?
You see, even today at Land Rover show, the Twist Off draws the biggest crowd.
Maybe we should bring the Twist Off back.
Do you think? Like the LRM live next year in May.
At Malvern, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think? If you want to see the RTI ramp return, Send an email, editorial at
we need a vote on this.
Bit of a blast from the past, maybe. It's not been done for a while.
And actually, if you don't want to see it ever return, also get in touch because we'll take a judgment.
Well, this is it. It's funny. Trends, how you see trends come and go. I mean, it only seems like yesterday I would be in the car with my mum and dad or whatever in Tesco car park, and you'd see a bobtailed Range Rover with like the badging modified to say hangover and like all mud falling off the bottom.
I haven't seen one of them for years.
An old two-door classic, and you think now they're all gone.
I know.
I tell you what, actually, there's a guy on YouTube that I've watched for a little while called Church House Classics, and he specialises in old Range Rovers. And he actually took a bobtailed Range Rover Classic a few years ago now, I think it was, and it had obviously been butchered for off-roading, as was the way back then, because everyone did it. It was like cut the arches out, big tyres, bobtail it to get rid of the boost the departure angle. And he actually extended the chassis back to the length it should have been and the body and put it back to standard, and I thought that was really cool. It's like gone full circle.
That's no mean feat, isn't it? Putting it back's hard work than taking it away.
Definitely, especially if you see some of the rough jobs people used to do with like a weekend, a jigsaw and a box of rivets and some sealant. It's just like shut it, cut it around and rivet it back together with a bit of tiger seal here and there to keep the water out.
Do you remember, because you were talking about pay and play a second ago?
Yeah.
Did you ever go to the Devil's Pit?
I've been a couple of times, yeah.
That's taken the lives of many Land Rovers, site.
Sadly, I don't think they run pay and plays there anymore. After, I think a few months ago, they called it. And
Did they?
They no longer... I've been there like fairly recently, within the last 2 or 3 years.
Oh, okay, wow.
And it is a proper...
It's an old quarry.
Is it not a chalk pit?
Chalk pit.
Yeah.
But then it was filled with rubbish, basically.
Right, okay.
Skip hires used to take stuff there to fill the holes back up.
Right.
And that was pretty much my only real sort of experience back in the day of, my own lightweight Land Rover, the first Land Rover went around there.
Yeah. I mean, it's been going decades, hasn't
Decades, yeah. In fact, I've even in my life bought a Land Rover from 2 Land Rovers from the organisers of that place.
Oh, really?
A guy called Simon Smith. I don't know how he's getting on, but that place, there used to be a bobtailed Range Rover there with V-grip tyres.
Yeah. Old dump tyres.
Army paint, basically.
Yeah.
And an old chap called Ray, I always remember, and he had an old camouflage jacket on. That thing was probably the most unstoppable thing I've ever seen around there.
There was a guy in our village, actually,
V8, obviously,
with that exact combination, 2-door classic with a V8, dumper tyres, obviously trailered it there, bobtailed, and I used to see it out and about, and I just think, I'd love to go with him for a day and hoon that around Devil's Pit and make a right mess.
Again, back then, we used to go as spectators more often than
not,
really? Because we were young lads, we couldn't always afford to pay to drive around there and stuff like that, so we would go and spectate, and we stood there, and this one guy said to me, he said, "Oh, do you want to come round with me?" And it was in his Range Rover, and I said, yeah, of course. He goes, I jumped in, put my seatbelt on. He said, if you wouldn't mind just sticking your foot on the transfer box, it was in low range,
right?
It kept jumping out of low box.
No pressure.
So I had to sit really uncomfortably. That's why he wanted me in there as passenger.
Needed some manual.
So my right boot was against the low box, the gear stick.
Right.
And every time he came off the throttle, that thing would like fight me. Can you imagine? I got the worst cramp in my life. It was like,
there's nothing like going down a near vertical hill, and the only thing keeping that vehicle under control was your right leg.
No. Do you know what I saw there? This was, again, many, many, many years ago, so we're probably talking 30 years ago.
Right.
That's, a long time, 29, 30 years ago. A Series 3 109 soft top.
Okay.
With 2 people in it in the front, people in the back, coming up one of those hills, and it got 3/4 of the way up, kind of stalled, and he turned the steering backwards and it rolled.
No.
Literally rolled. One guy came flying out, Do you know what? And we were stood at the top of the hill because you couldn't really walk down that hill without. Well, I mean, they're very steep. Everyone just got out and went, "Oh, that was a bit of a shocker."
Did they?
Yeah,
they were unharmed.
No harm.
Wow, they were lucky.
Can you imagine? It rolled on a tilt, like a soft top tilt.
You've got, yeah.
I don't know how they survived.
Massively lucky, because actually, if you've ever been to Devil's Pit, you'll know exactly what it's like. But especially in winter, you stray from even the flat bit, the car park, is like a bog.
Awful,
after bad weather, and everywhere else it's such a slick, slippery sort of surface, isn't it? Which of course you get that in your brakes and everywhere else, and you're trying to blast clay out of your hubs and everything for weeks afterwards. But
it was horrendous. It wasn't like normal mud would wash off. It just wouldn't go.
No, and once it's baked on, it's even worse. It sets like brick. It's Yarwell was a bit like that as well, actually. I touched on that before when my front axle snapped off. I've been to quite a few pay and plays, actually, looking back, and they're really good fun. Really good fun.
I think they're more fun if you haven't got the responsibility of driving the car home at the end of the day. So if it's a trailered vehicle, purely built for pay and play, it's a lot better than taking your road car around.
Yeah, I mean,
you're more relaxed about. I was having to get to work on the Monday in the same car's just been around the Devil's Pit. So.
True. Yeah, I suppose so. I think it all depends on your own. You've got to have that in your mind that you've got to drive it home the next day, or you've got to drive it home that night. So you can't go too crazy. But then you always get people who like trailer stuff there, or they've obviously got a vehicle they've had for years and they're not too bothered about denting it and things like that. And actually watching them can be just as much fun as driving your own stuff around. I seem to remember. One of the best. Remember the Curtain off-road site? Did you ever go to that?
I've never been round.
Oh wow! It was for a start the biggest off-road site I think probably in the country. I can't remember how many acres it was.
Is that still going?
I'm not sure. I think they run private days there, but I'm not 100% certain. But
do you know what we should do? Right?
What's that?
We need to compile a list of all active pay and play sites in the UK and get them in to Land Rover Monthly into the magazine.
I think that's a good idea,
just to see what's out there, just to compile a list, because if we don't know, unless anyone else knows, there's some fantastic pay and play sites.
The last thing I heard from Curtain was they'd started up their own Facebook page under a different name, and it was a sort of it was almost like a club. I think it was for insurance reasons. They couldn't just have members of the public turn up, pay money and go off and do whatever they wanted. I think that it had to be a bit more structured, and I think a lot of them have gone that way. Bure's Pit was another good one. I don't think they're running anymore, unfortunately. Sites that are running, on a more positive note, Avalanche Adventure I know are still going. They're fantastic. Really nice mixture of stuff. You've got like a big open area with water splashes and mud and hills, and then you go sort of through a little gap and you've got a big woodland section. So that's worth a look if you fancy a play. It's fairly central as well.
I know a good one.
Go on.
Wadden.
I've never been to Wadden.
I have got so stuck there. Basically, I went there to Wadden in my ex-military 90 natural aspirated diesel a few years ago. Actually quite a few years ago. And I wondered why everyone was congregating around this thing. And I followed my mate Pete, and he went through in his 110. And when he said, go that way. Of course, I was like, yeah, why?
It's never a good sign if people are congregating in one spot.
Of course. I was a bit of a naive. Drove in, and this hole sort of appeared, swallowed the entire 90. The 90 sitting on its side, so my passenger at the time couldn't get out.
Nice.
And I'm having to climb out the top, and I just leap down, and then I'm up to my waist in mud.
Oh.
It was basically, I'm sure the Land Rover was slowly but surely disappearing.
I bet everyone was having a laugh.
Of course. I mean, now it'd make a viral video because I was the most stupid to go into that mud hole. But what if that was a great site, actually?
Yeah, I really wish I'd gone to that.
It still runs, I think, doesn't it? Yeah. They do RTVs and things there.
Okay, yeah. Stainby's a great RTV site. Trialling, right? I really want to get back into trialling.
Why don't we go?
I want to take the 109 trialling.
Oof, really?
Well, I've got nothing else to take.
Okay. Freelander? Talking about your
Do you know what?
Freelander,
Yeah.
we're going to change the subject.
Go on.
Is it still running?
Yeah, it's perfect.
There you go.
I think I've got away with it. The coolant level still there. Still
Right, that's fixing.
perfect.
For another 100,000 miles?
She's set to go 100k easily.
More.
I'd love to get it to 250. I think I will get it to 250 quite easily.
I wonder who's out there with a high mileage Freelander 2.
There's a few around that are up there, high 200s.
Really?
I always like to
Strong mileage.
Discovery 3 and 4, you get a lot of people sort of competing mileage wise. There's one guy I've been speaking to, I really must get back in contact with him to do a proper feature. Uses his Discovery 3 for car transport. That's what his business is. He runs cars around, does logistics and stuff. Nearly on 1 million miles. It might well be on 1 million miles now.
Amazing.
Discovery 3. Yeah, just shows they'll do it if you look after them. Possibly, you know, not saying it hasn't had bits changed, but what a comfy car to go around the country in.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Talking of trialling though, Freelander 2s,
back to trialling.
people have quite successfully used Freelander 1s for trialling for quite a long time, so I expect a Freelander 2 would actually do quite well.
I think they would. And a Freelander 1, in fact, any of them really.
I think the last time I went to Stainby, that's a great trial site. They do quite a lot of competition there. There was a guy in a Freelander 1 3-door V6, which is obviously automatic, and all it had was a set of mud tyres and a bash plate on the front, and he was absolutely blitzing it. He was doing so well.
So for listeners then that don't know what RTV is,
Yes. So road taxed vehicle, that's what that stands for. Trialling essentially is driving, precision driving off-road through a series of gates, which are normally laid out with a pair of bamboo canes, like garden canes.
Okay.
They start fairly easy and they get harder the more gates you drive through, type thing. If you get all the way through every gate, you get what's called a clear, so you don't score any points. If you hit, I don't know, the second gate in, you'll get whichever number of points is assigned to that
might be
gate.
a 2-point worth.
Yeah, so normally
if you hit an easy one, you get
more points.
Okay.
And then there'll be a series of sections, which is a series of, you know, gated stages, if you like, throughout the day. And the idea is obviously to get as far through each section and score the lowest number of points you can. So if you can get clears all day, then you'll win. But they're laid out specifically on really quite difficult terrain, so it makes obviously driving between the bamboo canes as difficult as it.
I suppose if it's like a cross axle bit, then your roof might touch the cane with it.
Yeah, so
you have to allow for the vehicle's movement left and right.
There's all sorts of things you've got to take into consideration. Like you say, you've got to carry momentum in certain parts, which you obviously don't want to go too fast through a gate because you could hit it, but you need to go fast enough to carry yourself through mud and up hills. It's really, really good fun. They have different classes. So RTV that we touched on is road tax vehicle. So cars that are taxed and MOT.
So I could turn up in my 90, say, hello, I'd like to take part in your RTV. And
pay your money.
Pay your money.
You probably have to sign up to the club either as a day member or
to go onto their insurance or the landowners' insurance. It's all about insurance now, isn't it?
But yeah, turn up and have a go. And it takes, because I love a bit of off-roading, but when you're trialling, you've got that extra element of skill. It really helps to hone your skills off-roading.
Okay.
I've not done one for many years, but I used to go.
I think we should go.
Shall we?
Yeah, I want to.
All right, we'll do it.
And then we'll create a bit of competition between us.
I mean, I'll be in a 109 Series 3, so you've already got the advantage because.
Here we go. Yeah,
not that I'm making excuses.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, getting the excuses in early.
That's another thing, actually. If you're in a vehicle, it depends club to club. The rules do differ. It always used to be the clubs that I used to trial with. If you're in a vehicle with a 100-inch wheelbase or more, you get what's called a shunt. So
yeah, especially the 109.
Oh yeah. So a shunt is if you get to a really tight bit and you can't swing round because you haven't got enough steering lock or the car is too long, you shout the word shunt and then you can you have one chance to reverse, and you
On
can do
each
like
section, you could have a shunt on each section, could you?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
It's like a 3-point turn. But the rest of the time, your vehicle has to maintain forward motion at all times. If you stop, then I think you get whichever gate you went through last. It's all about keeping moving, and it's great fun. And like I say,
so these are obviously organised by volunteers,
clubs. Yeah,
I want to go.
It's sort of been a bit of a dying art in recent times. Like popularity of trials does seem to be, it's taken a bit of a downturn. So I think it's really important to, if you've got a local club and you want to have a go, by all means go and have a crack, because it
could recreate what it was.
Get the numbers back up. One of the best days out Land Rovering I think you can have, actually, doing a club trial.
Okay.
And they're pretty much all over the country as well.
So if RTVs aren't for you, then what's next? What?
So RTV is sort of like your intermediate skill level, if you like.
Don't they do a one for younger drivers as well?
Yeah, so Tyro.
That's right.
Tyro. That's for, I think you can compete from the age of 13 in a Tyro.
That rings a bell.
I'll have to brush up on like I say, it's been a long while since I looked at the regs, but a Tyro is even milder than an RTV, so you can compete in a completely standard Land Rover and you won't damage it. That's the idea of a Tyro.
So as RTV, you could damage.
RTV is just a little bit more challenging, so you've got
a few scratches,
a bit of potential. Scratches, slightly deeper mud. You might get stuck. You might need recovering. You are still driving off road, so there's always the potential for scuffs and things like that.
Okay.
But a Tyro is as mild as trialling comes, basically. So if you've got kids who aren't old enough to drive on the road but they're old enough to do a Tyro, that's a great place to get them into to start driving, really, as we were saying.
That and the future of, if you want to carry your enthusiasm through your own kids and get them involved.
Absolutely. So yeah, Tyro's like your novice, your mild.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong, still a challenge, just not as likely to damage stuff as anything more extreme than that. RTV is like probably the most common trialling class that you'll find. So again, vehicles that are road taxed and MOT'd and insured, you can drive there, trial all day and then drive home. But the terrain tends to be a little bit trickier than a Tyro. And then do you have like a navigator or anything in the passenger seat? You can have a passenger.
Okay, but they're not there to...
I don't think, generally speaking, they help that much. It's more a passenger for the experience of riding around.
So it's not like they're saying, bit left a bit, right?
I mean, they might.
But that you don't get points for taking deducted for passengers.
No. It's your choice if you want a passenger or not. And then top of the tree is CCV, which is cross-country vehicle, which are normally non-road legal, specialist-built trialers, which are...
Like a course-sprung 80-inch with a V8.
Exactly
which is probably
like
the ultimate cross-country vehicle. Vehicle in my... Well, no, probably isn't, actually. It's 100-inch, isn't it? 100-inch.
For trialling, an 80's up there because it's all about manoeuvrability. If you can drive something as nimble and as sort of short as an 80 and still get it places where a longer wheelbase vehicle can get, you've got more advantage because you've got better steering lock, better agility.
So is it right to say CCV then is roll cages, helmets?
Yes, definitely.
Harnesses, FIA regulated, or?
I think, yeah, I believe so. It's all about, obviously safety is paramount. CCV, when you go to a CCV trial and you look at the sort of terrain and the sort of angles and the places these vehicles get put, you can see why safety is so critical, because it is like near vertical climbs and drop-offs and bomb holes and deep mud and water. That it is such good fun to watch. Most clubs will run one or two classes, so they might do an RTV and a CCV on the same day, so you could compete in one and watch the other. CCV, I've got great memories, and there's something about a V8 screaming up a hill, echoing through woodland with like mud and like a hot exhaust and slight tinge of EP90 in the air.
Yeah, I know.
It's a great way to spend a Sunday. I recommend it. And often they're held in winter as well, which means you've got more mud and everything's a little bit slipperier and
more challenging.
So if you're looking to, it's a great way to get into motorsport as well, because it's pretty cheap to do. You can enter in your own Land Rover. You've just got to have, there's certain regulations you might have to adhere to depending on your club. So like some clubs you've got to carry a fire extinguisher, only a small one, cheap to buy. You might have to have a secondary throttle return spring, things like that. But I mean, it would take you a weekend to prep a car for a year of trialling. And the
this is for RTV as well, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Entry fees are generally quite low. And you get a whole day of off-roading, challenging off-roading.
Hanging out with like-minded people.
With loads of other people who are there for the same reason, having a good old time.
Sounds good, man.
Yeah.
We should do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's look around and see what club we fancy hanging out with. And
also compile a list of active...
We should do pay and plays, yeah.
Pay and plays, because, do you know, that reminds me of the magazines of old, actually. The Land Rover Monthly of old, we used to have pay and play listings, and we just probably need to bring it back.
Actually, a good question, because trialling is a bit different because you're doing it as part of the club.
Competitively in part of something.
Are pay and plays as popular as they used to be?
I would say they're probably not. For the very reason, the values of the cars that people used to do it in have gone up.
Actually, that's possibly an unfair question. Are pay and plays as popular as they used to be for Land Rover owners? Because there's tons and tons of disposable, if you like, non-Land Rovers that you can pick up for pennies, like that are on the verge of scrap type thing.
So what would you, if you didn't have a Land Rover, what would you take around a pay and play? Is there such?
Well, I wouldn't turn up in anything that wasn't a Land Rover, because what's the point?
Yeah. I'll tell you what, one of the best things around that, you back to the Devil's Pit, one of the best non-Land Rover vehicles I saw go around there was, well, two in fact I'm going to say. One was a Lada Niva Cossack. Do you remember the Lada?
Yeah.
Their 4x4 Ladas.
Yes, 1.7 petrol I think they were.
The later one was fuel injected.
Right.
I think the earlier one might have even been a 1.5.
Right, okay.
On carbs. And exceptional things. And the other thing for like deep mud was Suzuki Jimneys, SJ410s.
Yeah, the Suzuki.
They would skim across the top of the mud. They wouldn't sink.
They've always had that reputation for being
high revving and carry through the mud holes and things.
Yeah.
But we're not here about to talk about Suzukis, are we?
Super lightweight.
Yeah, revvy.
I wonder how light you could make a series Land Rover for off-roading.
Well,
mind you, they're not massively heavy as it
not
is
really.
it? Steel chassis and the bodies. Maybe you can. I don't know. But either way, that's the other thing, of course, that's quite good about trials, is depending on whether it's a Land Rover club or a general off-road club, you get the opportunity to see all types of machinery compete, even, like we said, from Series 1s to complete home-built hybrid 80-inch coil-sprung, like dedicated trialers. Freelanders, Discoveries are quite popular. The old Range Rovers, do you remember the Range Rover Classic? They had the viscous transfer box, so it wasn't like geared, but it had what was it, Borg Warner transfer box.
No, I don't remember.
They always had a big advantage because you could be cheeky with them, because you could pull the handbrake to get and gun it, and the front would like crab itself round to get round tight corners. Yeah, I remember that.
I'm not familiar with that
vividly from my days trialling back when I had my one of my TD5 90.
So we need to organise that then. We need to go trialling.
Definitely.
For anyone local to, we're born in South Lincolnshire.
There's a few clubs.
We need a local club.
A few clubs around that I know do it. Essex Land Rover Club do it. Beds, Hearts and Cams possibly. I think they still do the occasional trial. Who else? I can't remember. There is another one that I've sort of vaguely keep up with, and I like looking through the pictures of the trialling. So yeah, if you fancy watching Steve and I make fools of ourselves at a trial, reach out and we'll come along and spend a day bashing around the woods in our old Land Rovers.
Yeah, give it a go.
Yeah, I'll be well up for that.
What could possibly go wrong?
Oh dear. Right. So, moving on then, Steve. Shall we have feature of the week?
Yeah, I think we should.
Are you strapped in and prepared for some Land Rover goodness? This week's feature of the week is all about how to make your Land Rover better at what you like to do with it. So obviously when Land Rovers come out of the factory, they're designed to be as good for as many things as possible to as many people, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, one size fits all.
Yeah. So, but obviously, depending on whether you like to go off-roading, green laning, camping, if you just like to use it
Travel
on the
around the
road,
world.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's revisions and improvements you can make to make it better for that particular activity.
Okay.
And that's
Yeah.
all about. That's what this issue is sort of based on. So, improve your Land Rover. Sponsored by 4x4 tyres, funnily enough. So not only do you get tons of information about the best upgrades and accessories to fit to your Land Rover, you'll get a great idea of what tyres to fit to it as well.
Well, we all know that the number one thing people will fit to their Land Rover, the very first thing, is tyres.
Absolutely, because they make the biggest difference.
And it defines what you're about, doesn't it? We've said this in episode
exactly,
1 of whatever podcast we did. It defines who you are and your intention.
Yes,
So
indeed.
if you're ready to go in a pay and play, you want the most aggressive looking mud tyres, and you want everybody to know that you're a hardened off-roader.
Absolutely, and actually going back, I remember when I was trialling, the Insa Turbo Special Track had recently come out, which was basically you fitted them and you would dominate at trialling. They were sort of a game changer really, and then everyone jumped on them. But so special section in this month's magazine, Improve Your Land Rover, loads of great information in there. We've got green laning is covered, camping and overlanding, we've got off-roading, like pure off-roading, and that would probably cross over into trialling as well. Performance, if you want a little bit more power, a little bit more
a lot of people are going
handling.
Yeah, the fastest Land Rovers.
Best upgrades for classic Land Rovers, and of course a lot of people now going down the sort of luxury weekend cruiser type thing, so there's a section for that as well. Again, sponsored by 4x4 tyres, so not only will you get all the inspiration and information you need on accessories, but also some really useful information about tyres as well. So check that out. That's in the current issue. And also in the current issue, we have our ever popular new product section.
So that must mean only one thing.
Well,
Product of the week.
Product of the week. And this week's product of the week is insulated mugs from Camelback.
Who doesn't like an insulated mug?
How many times have you enjoyed your cup of tea or coffee that a little bit more, because it doesn't go cold instantly once you've turned off your jet boil or your kettle or whatever, and you can sort of just
couldn't agree more.
Take in the scenery and enjoy it. And that's exactly what these two new mugs from Camelback do. They're called Camelback Thrive mugs. You can get them in 1/2 litre and 1 litre sizes.
Can't imagine a litre of coffee.
A litre of coffee, that'd give you a kick up the backside in the morning, wouldn't it?
A litre? That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a fair mug. Look at that. For the camera, I'm showing Steve a picture of the mugs.
That's like a pint and 3/4.
Yeah, imagine.
Nearly 2 pints of coffee.
The best thing about
That
these,
might keep me going.
they have 100% leak-proof lids. So if it falls out of your cubby box or your cup holder, don't worry. It's not going anywhere. Everything's fine. And they will keep hot drinks hot for up to 5 hours, which gives you plenty of time to get through that litre of coffee.
Yeah.
So you haven't got to down it in one. It will be too hot, Steve. It's insulated.
Go on then. How much is the Camel?
Well, you'll be pleased to know these are actually a very reasonable price, from £35 for, I'm guessing, the 1/2 litre, and then the 1 litre is slightly more expensive. I'll have to refresh my memory of that. But yeah, the 1 litre version, actually, I've lied to you. 1/2 litre version will do up to 5 hours. The 1 litre version, you've got even longer to drink your litre of coffee, will do up to 10 hours and fits in cup holders. So don't say we never give you nothing.
Great way of saving money when you go to the shows.
Yeah, make your own
coffee. Keep it with you all day.
Absolutely. And you've got 10 hours to drink it. 10 hours to drink a litre. Challenge accepted.
Does it keep beer cold?
That's a very good point. I
It's
bet it would.
insulated.
I bet
So if
it
it's
would.
cold beer that goes in,
Yeah. And being leak-proof, if you got slightly...
not when you're driving. 'cause
No,
you
not when you're driving,
Sit there.
obviously. But if you were walking around and you had a nice cold beer in there, or something else a little bit spicier, it would stay cold for longer. And if you had a mishap and dropped it or fell over, it wouldn't spill. So a mug for all occasions, I think.
There you go.
There you go. So check that out in the latest magazine. Loads of other cool new products as well. So I think we've made some decent ground there, don't you?
So we now know your Freelander's fixed.
Yep. Still
We're going to go trialing.
We've answered a listener's question.
hopefully.
Yes.
And Daniel should get in touch when he buys his first Land Rover and let us know.
Daniel, please do keep us up to date. Send us a picture. We'll get it in the mag. That'd be really cool. And best of luck with the search. I hope you find a real gem. I'm sure you will. Like I say, keep checking the LRM marketplace on the website.
There's some good vehicles on there at the moment.
There is, and like we said before, updated every day. So fresh to market. Get in there quick. Strike while the iron's hot.
That's it.
Job's a good one. Right.
So we'll catch up with you guys, next week?
Next week.
Same time next week.
See you then.
Bye for now. How long is that?